for me, those are more feelings, emotions, ways of being than an actual position or a job or those type of things. It's elements of life that I want to feel more than just, I want to have this job or this title.
Hey, Creating Maven. I'm Joy Spencer, your reframe specialist, with one important message. Your real work, it's not your job or your career. Your real work is what you create. And what you create is what sets you apart and makes you incomparable. It's your legacy. I'm here to show you a whole new way of working so you can create with your gifts, make a unique contribution, and finally get paid to be yourself. This is Reframe to Create. Today, my guest is Sawida Kamara, a longtime friend of mine who spends her days doing organization development work with small community-based nonprofits. And the rest of her time she spends trying to live her life on her own terms. What that has meant for her over the past year is that she's become a digital nomad. Yes, Sawida has chosen to move to at least 3 different countries to work remotely from those sunny, tropical beach, delicious seafood-filled locations just because. Sawida is living out courage and curiosity, 2 key C's of the 5 C's of a Creating Maven I shared in episodes 28 and 29. And as I've watched her travel around and even joined her at one of her chosen destinations, she's made it crystal clear to me. Some people are just doing it differently out here. Some people are always approaching their vanishing point and exploring the outer edges of their imagination. Today, Sawida is going to show us a whole new way of approaching and being in our own work. I wanted to dig deeper into where her willingness to live and work in this new way comes from for her and the underlying philosophy that drives it all. This is what she said.
Actually, when I think about it, maybe I'll tackle the last one, that underlying philosophy, which I think for me has been this very strong impulse to wanting to feel free, or this sense around freedom, and freedom meaning like this option of change that feels freeing to me, to not have constancy and normalcy. And so it took me a while for me to get there, because one of the things I had to do was first identify that I'm really comfortable with change. I'm taught to think that change is something to be scared of, but when Sawida in her core essence just doesn't trip me up to be like, oh, I want to do something different and just go with it. What I had to realize was that, it's because that feels free to me. And so that's why there isn't a fear around change for me, because it is a process for me feeling free. And so to that would be my biggest philosophy that underpins it, is this, I feel like a pulse toward what always makes me feel free. I kind of think back to, I did several iterations of this core desired feelings type stuff, or desire mapping. And I remember that it didn't matter how many times I did that, freedom just would come up every year. And I was like, oh, well, that's, if anything, one of my core desired feelings.
Now, if you're not familiar with core desired feelings and the desire mapping that Sawida is talking about, it's a process created by Danielle Laporte, an inspirational speaker and entrepreneur who calls it a way of setting goals with soul. Danielle's approach is to help you identify what goals you have each year based not on what you want to achieve, but how you want to feel. It reminds me very much of something that I was taught in coaching school, and that is the difference between overt goals and covert goals. An overt goal might be something like wanting to climb the next rung of the corporate ladder and get a promotion, but what I was taught to help my clients work through is the fact that this is not their real goal. There's a covert goal that's underneath, and that covert goal is what they think they will feel and experience once they obtain the overt goal of getting the promotion. And covert just means like secret or underneath, and overt is overt, like obvious. Maybe it's a feeling of autonomy or power or ability to influence, freedom, or a sense of mastery. Whatever it is, it's not just about the promotion. In fact, it's not about the promotion at all, which is merely an overt goal. It's about the feeling they'll get from it. It's about the covert goal underneath. It's what they want all along anyway. What Sawida is showing us in this episode is that she cuts to the chase in how she sets her goals or decides where and how she works. She cuts right to the covert goal of how she wants to feel. And what I've learned from working with so many clients is that this is the most effective way to really get to the root of your goals and experience sustainable change. So we really dug into this matter of freedom because in the 9 to 5 context, for so many, it seems to be an elusive thought and it seems to only belong to entrepreneurs. And as professionals, we think we have to follow the script. We have to follow the job description. And a lot of people want to feel free, but there's an expectation that you can't be free with a job. So how has Sawida managed this?
Well, I think that's the thing, the with a job factor. I think first is just realizing you can be free and what does that mean and look like for you no matter what the job circumstance is. And the courage part, to touch on that a little bit, is to also just kind of feel like what you may be thinking and doing is probably a unique thought to you, but there are a lot of other people who work in non-traditional ways that they are free in how they're doing it and they still have quote 9 to 5 jobs. But it's really because for them, they have decided that it doesn't have to look and fit the traditional. So those are people who can be nurses who have decided, I'm going to work 12-hour shifts. I would never feel free doing that, but they value like I'll do 3 days of 12-hour shifts so that I can have a very long weekend. So for them, that feels like freedom to them because then they get to maybe travel during that time. They get to do other things. Their week feels like something they've reclaimed. So for me, in that is that it was also identifying that there's more than one way to work. What it has been is that I got used to one idea of work, and that also created a sense around what felt safe and what felt like the only experience of work that I could have. And then I went into the other extreme, which I don't, it may not be an extreme, which was, well, the only way I can break this up is to be an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
And the longer I was doing consulting, I actually started feeling clamped down by that, less free by that. So I was like, huh. So it's not, for me, it wasn't working for myself, not working for myself. It was like, how do I actually create space to work how I want to work, no matter the environment? Which is what that feels like for me. And so that, and being courageous in saying, yeah, I don't, even when I re-entered back to a job after consulting, I didn't accept a full-time job, even though that's what I was offered. So even that was me first giving myself permission to say, just because they're offering you a full-time job, that made me feel constricted. I did not want to work 40 hours a week for anyone. I wanted to work part-time. That's not what I interviewed for, but that's what I wanted. And I remember making a conscious decision around like, well, I'm going to accept their offer with a contingency. Like, so can we talk about this being part-time? And how about 25, 30 hours a week, and seeing it like I'm trying to get to what will feel free for me. And that's what my goal was in the negotiation, was what will end up making me feel like the offer didn't suddenly feel constricted, because it did. The idea of a full-time job immediately felt constricted to me.
So you were very clear on your values, a good starting point. And then you ask yourself questions like, what does this look like for me? What does free look like to me? Not what everyone else defines it as. And then you actually wait for an answer. Like you actually pause and think it through and feel it through, and then are open to, oh, okay, this is different than what I might have thought of the first run or what someone might have said, and being open to new possibilities. And I don't think people give themselves that space at all to do that practice of saying, what's important to me? And then it's like, how can I have more of this? What might it look like for me? And then pausing and seeing what comes up that might be different and that might be completely unique because you did full time, you went to be an entrepreneur. Oh, surprise. This doesn't feel free to me. Okay, coming back to, then it's like, okay, come back to 9 to 5. No, well, I don't want to do the 40 hours either. It's like always being curious about what you're feeling into and being willing to ask for something different.
Definitely. And part of that willingness also, it comes from me not judging that what I want is a thing that can't be created. I'm someone who
Mm.
fundamentally do believe in that idea of like when, the scripture that said God gives you the desires of your heart. I see it the other way. Like if the desire is there, it's given. So I don't see it as fundamentally like, oh, I have to make this happen. I'm like, oh, I desire it. So therefore, the pathways will open up for it to be this because it's a way I'm seeing the world. And it's not talking yourself out of the desire or what you feel because we're used to criticizing what we think or feel because we are like, or having to run it through a normalcy test. It doesn't feel normal. This is what normal people do. And it's like, well, no one wants to be normal when we really think about normalcy. I think we want to just be what we want to be, but we try to fit in and go along. So what you were saying about the giving of the space, I've taken kind of my career transitions as very thoughtful moments for me. And so I haven't felt this sense of like I'm rushing out of something and rushing into something. So I've allowed it to be like it can take as long as it needs to take before I say yes.
So, what are the biggest lessons you've learned from living this out, putting it into practice?
There's probably several lessons, but one of my biggest lessons is this idea that even though I'm someone who thinks like I feel I'm comfortable with change, that I'm always going to be surprised by what even comes up for me as my next, and that I'm often having to wrestle with this new sense of, well, who do you think you are? Because I keep pushing. There's a part of me that's like, well, we did this the last time, so let's do something very different than what we did the last time. And it keeps pushing me into this world where I keep answering like, okay, I get to be this now. This has created a place where I'm always meeting myself, where I'm meeting that answer. Well, who do you think you are? Who can nomad? You're not independently wealthy. What do you mean?
Mm-hmm.
Digital nomad. And it's like, well, why not? Why not you?
Mm-hmm.
And who is the face of that? And why is that the face of that? So it's the biggest thing is just one of the biggest thing is just this real idea around like you get to really kind of push through your own boundaries and like your own limiting beliefs,
Mm-hmm.
and seeing like they kind of persist in a very interesting way, even as you keep pushing yourself into new things. But that it becomes a muscle. Like a limiting belief is going to be unpacked here in order for me to do what is coming up for me next. Because that was, this idea of especially moving from like, okay, I'm working 9 to 5, but I'm going to work from wherever I want to work in the world. I'm like, no one's going to let you do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that desire to get permission or
Yes.
thinking that you need permission, whether it's like, oh, I want to spend more time creating or I want to move somewhere or nobody else is doing this. We all get hung up in that sense that like you're looking around and you're like, are other people doing this? Okay, I don't know if it's okay. And do I have permission to do this? And to have the gumption and the courage to give yourself permission and say, well, I want to explore this. This is what I want to do. And and I always like to say, I'm not committing any crimes here. Like, it's like, as long as it's not, you're not committing a crime, like it's okay. Like you can forge ahead and move forward.
I like that actually, the framing around I'm not committing any crimes, because you sometimes the reactions, if you have strong, I can't speak for all people, but if you come from African background and like
Mm-hmm.
any simple thing outside of the traditional sometimes can feel like you are committing some huge crime against
Mm-hmm.
your parents, your society, so it really is like it might be different for what is expected of me, but it's not like novice behavior. I'm not the first person on earth to decide I don't want to live in the place that I work. I want to travel and work. I'm sure a lot of people have that impulse. And I think more often is that permission that you have to grant first to yourself before you are even getting to a place where you're even saying, oh, I'm going to discuss this with an employer.
So how do you deal with the furrowed brows, right? So you've gotten over your own internal hangups, or probably still working through it. How do you deal with, there are people out there who matter to you, who you care about their opinion, who maybe not disapproving, but they don't get it. They don't understand
what it is that you're doing and what journey you're on. Is this something, do we just leave the people in the dust, or is this, is there a way to bring them along? Do we need to bring them along? Like, how have you navigated the people in the peanut gallery?
Well, what's funny is that the people who I think would be the ones in the peanut gallery, you have to allow yourself to believe that there are more people who will get what you're going through or what you desire. And there are actually more people who will champion. You will have peanut gallery, but you will also have people who are like, oh, I love that. Yes. Who are even like signing up, like, let's do that. And it's the expectancy that there is a peanut gallery, one, but there's a peanut gallery in both realms.
Mm-hmm.
So it is a peanut gallery of both people who would be like furrowed brow, but people who their fate lights up when they hear this. And because I see a blend of both, it kind of makes me not worry so much about the people in the peanut gallery who are kind of furrowed brow. I kind of feel like they will see it as you continue moving forward. I don't think it's for them to always get what's going on. I try to unpack or translate as much as what I'm feeling in the moment if they ask. But I often tend to not engage in a lot of conversation around these type of things with even people who I anticipate may have a furrowed brow. And again, that's my judgment around whether they would have one. I generally go to my tribe. I've identified a tribe of people who I feel they're doing this in their own way. It doesn't have to look like my way, but they are doing this in their own way. And they're generally people who they're so into their own lives and what they're doing. They don't get into the furrowed brow. They're more like, but not furrowed brow. And I like that. I like that they're kind of like pleasantly neutral. Like,
Yeah.
sounds good to me. Enjoy.
So I love the idea of a tribe, because tribe community is so important to any journey that we are on. And, as we're trying to figure out how we want to work differently, how we want to create more, it's so important. What are the characteristics that you think that make up a good tribe member, a good cheerleading squad? Like, what does that person look like? If we're aspiring, if we're not ready yet to head on out there, but we want to support someone because we're eventually going to want to be supported, what is it that we need to be?
Someone who you listen with like a sense of, I'm listening for what I know to be true for this person. Someone who can listen to you and they're not filtering it through what their own stuff. So they do differentiation well, which means we don't have to be doing the same things. So therefore, when they listen to what you're saying, it's like they can just focus on what you're saying because they're not trying to compare or relate it back to their own experience, even if they can do that, but they authentically are listening to you in these moments, for what they can hear, for what would feel aligned to you. And that brings me to the another thing is that they a good tribe person, they know you in a way where they can hear when something doesn't sound right for you, and they're able to say, I don't know about that. And or they can be like, I don't like those people, I don't like that, and they're very able to articulate it, and they won't, they're not giving me instruction like, I'm counting you down, like I need this to change. They're just comfortable with telling you feedback about a situation that you may bring to them. And for me, that always lets me know, one, that they're listening, but two, that they do see a vision or a sense of around what I'm trying to be, and they can see when this is not what I see for you, and not in a controlling way, in a very true, supportive, nurturing way, because they're not manipulating or trying to make it change. They're just letting me know, I don't know about this situation. And then they move on.
Yeah.
It's never like, you don't feel like, oh, okay. What makes a good tribe person for me are just people who are also just living their lives in their own way. Like, I love to watch the people who you're like, oh my gosh, but every time you meet with them, something fabulous is going on in their life in some way, shape, or form. It doesn't mean big fabulous, but like they're excited about something. I value people in my tribe who are excited about life, who are enjoying life. They're navigating ups and downs, but they're not feeling beaten up by life. Because that's how I feel, and I don't really, I get energy from those type of relationships. I get a lot of good energy from those type of relationships.
I feel like you're a great cheerleader. Like for me, when I was on the journey and leaving CDD and thinking about, going on my exploration, I remember there were those key moments when I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like I made a mistake. And you were like, it's fine. It's going to be great. You've made the right choice. Keep going. So I think definitely people who are like that calming, affirming, the word is affirming that comes to mind, who like can see your journey and what you're doing and will affirm even the little steps that you're taking towards what you may not clearly know what it is yet, but they're there supporting and with you on it. If you're like, I want to work differently or I want to go out and do something else, like it's so important to have those people who are there supporting that, because for a lot of people, this is different. It's different to think about your work differently. It's different to think about leaving work. It's different for a lot of people. And when you have someone or people in your life who can affirm that desire to be curious and to explore is something that is not just, okay, but to be desired and to be pushed forward towards, it gives you that much more confidence to continue moving down that path. So I appreciate that, getting that from you. And I know how important it has been for me in my journey up until this point as I continue on. And there's something else that I think that you're great at and bring to the table, and I'm also curious about is I think you're able to be okay with the open-endedness and not have an answer or this is what's next, or even the sense of, and I'm thinking about the world that we're living in where people always want to know the end game, the end goal. So I'm changing the way that I work because what is the end goal that I want to get? Or I'm moving from here to there because what is the goal? What's the final impact that I want to get? And to be able to walk through life in a more open-ended fashion, what does it take to do that?
There's this adage that's going around, I think, especially in this time of like racial equity work and justice work and like these courageous conversations. There's all this talk around, commitment to non-closure, and non-closure as in we don't have to bring every conversation, everything we're doing into this, hey, we've closed it, we're done, we've put a pin in it. And it's a thing that as I started learning more about non-closure, I was like, it's almost like a life philosophy, not just something you do when you're doing tough work or critical, courageous conversations type work or daring leadership, but like an actual way of, so for me, it's been a level of this, seeing that I value non-closure. I have a goal or have many goals. I have vision, but I look at it like a lighted path. And as I take a step, I see what's ahead. I don't see the full path. And I learned this from one of my friends, Jackie, years ago, where it's almost like the Michael Jackson, I think is it Billie Jean, where he steps and the path lights up.
Yes, yeah, it's Billie Jean.
That's I see, like, she's an analogy where it's like that is life.
Mm-hmm.
If we can trust that when you step, it will light up and you'll know, okay, I'm here. And then the next time you're stepping, something will light up. So you don't have to know. You don't have to figure it out in this very like finality. When will this end? When will this be? And I'm trying to get here. I'm just on a path. And because I'm just on a path and I'm trusting that the path will light up, I'm trusting the feelings like, oh, I know I can tell when I'm stuck. I can tell when I feel I'm taking a step back. I can tell all that. But I know I'm going to keep going forward to it's like a felt unknown, but I'm comfortable with it. I'm comfortable. I'm comfortable with this sense around, you don't have to figure it out to be on the path. You just have to be on the path. And on the path, you figure out many things and just keep going instead of like, I'm trying to be this person. Me, I know I'm going to be this person for 2-3 years and I'm going to be wanting to be another person. And and I'm fine with that. Like, and for those who feel like I want to be something for the rest of my life, I definitely want to shout that out and honor and create space for a sense. If there is a thing that you do feel like this is a for life kind of thing, I want to make sure I have this in my life always. For me, those are more feelings, emotions, ways of being than an actual position or a job or those type of things. It's elements of life that I want to feel more than just I want to have this job or this title.
Yeah, I like that. And that's another way of going beyond jobs, like, right? So, I've spoken with Samuel about going beyond the job and being mission led. I talk about going beyond the job and focusing on creating. This is also, you're sort of helping us go beyond the job and think about the way that you want to feel, what you want to experience. You talked about that freedom or desire to feel free and not being encumbered by how you would define your work based on that. But you're just like, what I want is to feel free, and then it'll change. Sometimes being free is living in the US. Sometimes feeling free is moving to a different island. Sometimes feeling free is entrepreneurship. Sometimes feeling free is 9 to 5. Sometimes feeling free is part time. But you've identified something else that's bigger than and beyond the job, that's driving and defining what you want. And then the job is like the subset, or it manifests in a certain way in different times, but that's not what you're using to define and drive you forward. So I like how you've described that, and that sort of, and I've seen that with you and how you've approached your work. You're not leading with what position do I want next, what job do I want to do next, but it's like, really, how do I want to feel, and then working into crafting and creating that experience.
I would say it comes in waves for me in that. And when you are really, when it's because of this anchor to, I'm looking or I'm pursuing freedom, or not necessarily pursuing it, but maintaining, sustaining this place of freedom. I'm always inquiring and asking of my present situations what will make me free. And that includes work, but it's just a general thing around, well, even when I was nomading and wanting, I was nomading, I'm out of the country, but I had this immense desire of wanting to sell my condo. I could have just rented it out. But what felt free to me was selling it. It just felt free. It didn't fit, even though in all intents and purposes, it's not bothering anyone that it's sitting there empty.
Right. It's not bothering anybody.
It's not bothering anyone. It's just there, But what some of the things I was thinking around that is that I just kind of said, well, what do I want? And freedom is not only exclusive to me, it's also for those in my life. Also, it's something I desire for everyone. At that time, it was also when my parents are aging in their lives, I don't want them to feel on the hook for checking on my house and all that, even though I know they don't mind doing it. But I recognize when things feel like you're putting something on someone that may not feel like freedom to them, even if they can't articulate it like that. And so I just felt like, oh, well, I don't need a condo if it makes people feel obligated to things. I will always find a place to live. I can always find a place to live. It doesn't have to be this thing. And I am fine with those type of things where it's like, if it may look very different and very like insecure in that kind of way, but it's like I've learned freedom is actually a pathway for stability to me. So it often, the thing that feels most free often will look risky to others. But for me, it's like, oh, oof. Once that condo sold, I felt so much relief. I was like, oh. And I wasn't even in America while it sold, but it made me feel like one less burden in life. Yay. I felt light.
You're very much in tune with your values and how you want to feel, and that being a strong, compelling thing that moves you forward. Are there any times or moments when that has not worked the way that you expected? And what did you learn from that?
I will say, actually, that was that 1 year in full on independent consulting, because I like working with people, that sense around, again, having some level of a village, or even has been a part of my work. And so that independent consulting, working by myself, I hadn't realized like it would remove a sense of collaboration and a way of teamwork that is also important to me in how I work. I like doing work where I'm able to work with other people. Not very, there's things I do solo, but there are things I'm like, I like having other people. So that was the main moment when I realized like, oh, even though I want this sense of freedom over here, there's something I lost in the, and there are a lot of consultants who work with each other, but I wasn't working with other consultants in a way that felt in a thriving way for me. It felt kind of, sometimes I was taking a back seat because of how sometimes some consulting engagements are set up, where you're kind of like their first seat and you're second, or they're the prime, you're the sub, or just those type of dynamics. And so I remember feeling like, while this makes me feel free, there's other things I've lost that, and I could have said, okay, I could find a way to create that in the consulting realm. And I knew that intuitively, but I knew where I could always go find it, which was, oh, I can also work with people.
Right, right.
I can get a job. And what got clear was that and then when I had that immense, like, well, we don't want it to be 40 hours. And I was like, okay, I'll take care of that. We'll take care of both. So that's what I did. I was part time consulting and part time working. And I did that for 5 years, and that felt just right to me. But it was first realizing that there are other values that are important to me.
Yes, yes. And it's seeing the nuance and seeing that the, if the freedom is also isolation, that's not what you mean by freedom. And then taking again another look. And I commend you for not feeling stuck or beholden even to your own choices. Like you're like you said, hey, I'm going out, I'm going to consult, and they're like, oh, I guess that's not working quite as I expected, and being willing to pivot and shift again. And I think that that's something that people need to give themselves permission to do, and say, you have an idea of what you think is going to work. You're going to move in a certain direction. The moment it doesn't seem to be working the way that you thought, reflect again, ask another question, pivot, do something different. Don't feel like everything that you do is a decision that has to be so tied down lifelong and so in anchored that you can't make another choice, that you get to choose. And that's something I've learned from you, that you get to choose and you also get to make another choice. That's what it is to be a human being. You get to choose and you also get to make another choice, even if you're the one who made that first choice. You get to change your mind, right? That isn't that from your mom? Always used to say that. Yeah.
Yes,
Yes.
you get to change your mind. And I love that. I love having a mother who, I don't even know how old I was, but I remember when she said that, and I was like, oh, that's right. And it takes the judgment out of a quote bad choice, which I don't like that. It's just a choice you choose again.
Mm-hmm.
You made a choice, you got information. Oh, another choice. Oh, and that's life. And that is our life. Even when you are planning it out and you're following what you think, it still was a choice to say, okay, I'm going to go here. I'm going to do this. And you're just making a lot of choices. And I do think like this is a fast track way of really learning that a lot of your choices, you have to keep coming back and making another choice. And that it's a fast track way of really, I wouldn't say humbling you with that, but just letting you go easy on yourself, because you don't feel like every choice is some big choice. It's just a lot of pivot, 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 pivot. And that's how I see myself,
Mm-hmm.
like a dot on a map, like a animation. Like I'm just constantly moving, moving, moving. And you're like, well, where is this woman going? She's constantly just moving. It's not like this, it's like directionless. And it's like, oh, that's because, oh, I changed my mind. I'm going here now. And if you followed me on a map, I sometimes circle in a different direction. I look like I'm going backwards, but I'm very clear in how I'm feeling or I make sure I'm get clear about how I'm feeling. That is my commitment to myself. It's like, how does this feel? Does it not feel good to you? Does it not, are there other things that are missing? Okay, where can we pivot and shift? What do we think will create that for us or will enable us to experience that? I do ask a lot to myself. I'm in constant conversation with myself. Yeah.
Yeah, I see
Yeah.
that inquiry. That's huge. And I don't think people do that enough. And that's insightful to me, even in this conversation, being willing to be in conversation with yourself, ask inquire and pause and see what comes up, because you might be surprised at what new direction you might take. So what questions are you, if you feel free to share, what questions are you asking yourself these days? Maybe we can poach one of your questions for ourselves.
Oh, wow. So, a new question, because I'm always about newness in some way. A new question lately has been, what things have you, honed? What skills, what things have you built that you can continue to have out there, but they don't necessarily have to be you are the one that's doing them. Where can I bring on other people into my work?
Hmm.
Maybe I don't know if it's train, mentor, I don't know what it looks like. The question is really, how do you take what you've learned, the things that, and get it into other people and support them in that. And another question is the things that I love to do, the work that I say, oh, I love to do this work. I want more visibility around it. So a new question I've been having myself is like, how do I get this more visible into more people's eyes?
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know what that even means when I'm asking this question right now. I know I feel like the work I do is good work, and I feel like there's visibility, and there's something about it I feel needs to be visible. So I'm just asking, well, how?
I think there is an element of service to that, because I don't get any sense of ego about it, that like, look, I've done some good stuff and people need to see it. But it's like, yeah, there's some good stuff here. How can more people get to see this and experience this? And it's honing your gifts and bringing them to life and then offering them in service, figuring out how you can bring that to the world. And what you talked about first was this idea of essentially legacy. Like, how can I pass on? How am I working on passing on what it is that I have, the gifts, the skills that I bring to the table? Who else, who's the next generation? May not be someone younger, but who's the next generation to receive and take on and build on what I have and what I have to offer? So that those are great, and those are important and powerful questions to be asking. I had one last question for Sawida, because in reality, how do you put this into practice? This idea of being led by how you want to feel when looking for a job. I mean, how do you use that as a filter? Can you know this before you get into the job? Do you have to jump into it and then find out? I mean, help us out here.
It's a balance, an act of knowing I got to get a little in.
Yeah.
If I see something that is like, ooh, I'm excited, I will say, okay, I'm someone who always keeps her resume ready for whatever reason, even though I've gotten out of the habit of applying for jobs, because I've been someone who's manifested job offers, or people who've just emailed me and say, hey, we want to spread the word about a job that I've been like, oh, I am not spreading the word. That is for me. I've gotten consultancies that way. I've seen that happen so many times that I'm like, I trust that the thing I need to weigh in on through experience is always going to show up for me. So what I do is just that's that slowing down and that asking yourself questions and being like, well, what do you feel? Are you curious enough to like apply? And sometimes the answer is no, not really. I'm not curious enough to see if this is the thing, the next thing. Sometimes I'm like, I also do know and when I say no, I don't know, but I've learned enough to be mindful of when I'm just feeling run down or tired or bored or other things, and not being someone who makes big decisions when that's happening, because that will cloud
Yeah. Yeah.
you into thinking something's going to feel free.
Oh,
You're trying to
yeah.
escape, and escape is a freedom factor. Like when you're constantly fleeing, anything feels like freedom.
I think that's so important, because you're asking us to be much more intuitive and pay it, because, you're telling people, pay attention to how this feel or how you're feeling about this. And that's such a precarious thing, especially if you're not taking care of yourself in that moment. You're tired, you're hungry, all these things are going on, you haven't had enough sleep. And then that's the person who you now want to rely on for information. Like that's not going to be helpful. So the precursor then, it seems like, to this work of inquiring and seeing how you feel or what you want to feel into a thing or what's the values you want to lead with is self-care.
Yes.
Because if you're the instrument that's going to figure this thing out, you have to be taking care of yourself and be well and be healthy. Otherwise, what are we doing here? That's, going to be problematic. And then you're going to see escape as freedom, which I love that you defined it as like it's not the same thing. And I feel like I can identify with that. I've definitely had those moments where I was deeply frustrated, or certain things weren't going well. I thought weren't going well for me, and I just wanted to get out. I just wanted to leave. I just wanted to move on. And then I had a snack, and I had. I'm telling you, those plantain chips will fix all my problems. And then suddenly I'm like, oh.
I totally get why our parents would make us nap when we were having these like very strong reactions or we're crying. A nap or food, these things are resets. Or laughter, joy, these things are resets to your brain, like because you slow down the reaction to the state of unease or whatever that is. So now you feel different about the thing because you're not constantly reacting to that stimuli or that situation. You've taken care of, you're like, oh, I'm hungry. You could still be like, I'm ready to still leave my job. But I guarantee you, you
Mm-hmm,
will
mm-hmm.
go about it in a very more healthy way, that experience, and you will have more clarity in like what you're seeking because you're not just running away or running to.
You talked about freedom a lot, and you in a subtle way talked about how when you left, freedom was important to you, but then you realized, okay, well, I don't want to be isolated. I need the community. So, and I know that about you, that you value community. You're very much a community minded person, whether it's family and friends. What if people feel like they have identified, like, because you seem to have a singular, very clear one that's leading the pack, but what if someone feels like I have like three, four, five that seem about even to me in importance? How do I use those to help me pursue or design the areas and what I'm pursuing when it comes to work or job or not? How can someone navigate that path where it seems like, okay, it's not just one, but it's like five, top five?
One, I will hope your top 5 are complementary. And if you haven't figured out how they're complementary, that's your first step. For years, my top 3 were freedom, stability, safety. No, my top 5, ease and flow.
Mm-hmm.
For years, I was actually thinking ease and flow are my thing. And that's why I was always keeping that out there. I would always just focus on ease and flow until I was like, well, I go with the flow. I have some ease, those type of things. But I had to do that. Like, well, how do all of these things complement each other? That's actually, then it gave almost a priority or ranking to it. And you may not necessarily, they're all still there, but it's the complementary aspect of it. Like they shouldn't have you run around being all things and all these different things. They will line you up in very specific directions. And so I'm someone who says check into their and that came down from me just looking up what these words meant, like getting very clear about all their different definitions and thinking through like what does that mean for me. Sometimes I had to say, well, this particular decision just means or happens to meet that core desired feeling. And that doesn't negate or minimize really that this is an important thing for you, because what people feel is like it's maybe I have so many values. I think that's a great thing. I think when we add words like core, I think it makes people feel like they should narrow things down. Like you could have like 50 values if you really wanted to feel like you honor 50 values. It's still the conversation with yourself about what do those values mean for you? And if you can clearly answer that, and how does that inform how you want to be and show up and work? If you have an answer to that, and then you can walk like, oh, okay, now I get why these 5 are it.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't wrestle with when I had 3. or 5. I just was like, oh, I just need to understand why. I didn't feel like, oh, I just was like, well, why? Why do these keep coming up?
What was it, the phrase that you said, that commitment to not closure? Or is it openness?
Non-closure.
Yes, commitment to non-closure. I see that come up over and over again. You're not restricting yourself. You're not trying to get to the answer, but you're always inquiring. You're open. You're curious. And that allows you to get the courage and the clarity that you need when you need it to take that next step, because you're very much in the journey, very much in the process. Just ask a question. Just be curious. And, like Michael Jackson and Billie Jean, you'll know what the next step is to take when
As soon as you step,
when the next step lights up on the path.
you're like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
I'm going in the right direction, I think.
Maybe.
But it lit up, so I'm going regardless.
What do you want to leave the creating maven who is listening with, who is in their work? Maybe it's a good day. Maybe they're feeling really fulfilled and expressed that they're able to offer their gifts and they're really feeling great. Or maybe not. Maybe they're in a rut and stuck and back in that space again. You've taken some chances. You're on the journey in so many different ways. What do you want to leave them with that you think would be important for them to take with them?
A thing I would leave with them is to trust that you know more about yourself than you think you do. And that you've been filling out this sheet of paper, this blank page about yourself your entire life. Take pauses and revisit your journey. It's telling you more about yourself than you may think it is. And inquire, talk to yourself, ask yourself questions, be an inquisitor of yourself, because often you've been answering the very question. You've had your answer, but you don't listen to yourself. Or if you are knowing your answer and you know it clearly, perhaps don't say it. Don't filter that through other people. Just take your answer and go the courageous thing, which is going it alone, even if you're the only one that believes what you just told yourself. That's fine. That is perfectly fine. It's a journey it's an inner journey. It is a true inner journey, and be comfortable with your inner journey in this creating process.
Well, my creating maven, how did that feel? How do you want to feel? This is definitely a different way of thinking about and going about your work. What would it be like for you to try this? To be more in tune with how you really want to feel when thinking about your next job. To be as clear, if not more clear, about your covert goal as you are about your overt goals. To give yourself permission to work and be different. To build a tribe around you of people who get it and will cheerlead you as you go on your creating journey. To live with a sense of open-endedness and a commitment to non-closure. To feel your way along the Billie Jean lighted path that's showing you just your next step. In every single episode, I'm pushing you to think beyond your job so you can have an understanding of your work that's bigger, an understanding that reframes your work as what you create. With Samuel in episode 32, you learn to go beyond being job-led into being mission-led. And today, with Sawida, you've learned to lead with how you want to feel. I hope this has given you much food for thought and all the feels. So let's try it, shall we? Think about some goal that you've already set for yourself that you want to achieve. Maybe it's a promotion. Maybe it's a financial goal. Maybe it's for a new job you want to get. Since what you're really going for is how you think it will make you feel to finally get and experience it, ask yourself the question right now. How do I want to feel? Because what you might realize is that the vehicle you've chosen to get that feeling might not be the only way to get it. See you soon, Creating Maven. And remember to always ask yourself, how do I want to feel?